Hello and welcome to the Sports Blog on the Greater STL Sports Network. Robert Bowlesby here with you. You could tweet me at rbowlesbyjr. You could tweet the Greater STL Sports Network at Greater STLSN. We're kind of going to go all over with this one. We'll get into some blue stuff. We'll get into the hometown rundown, of course, and then on a kind of a slow St. Louis sports week, we'll kind of just go all over the world with this one. But first, we'll start it off with the St. Louis Cardinals. And really, up to today, you almost just got to say, wow. I mean, the players you've lost, and just in the pitching staff, should have affected this team a lot sooner than it has, which it hasn't yet. Your offense was already down when you lost Reynolds. So you could only go up from there. But with the way that just rotation's been going, and with the great signs that Jaime Garcia has shown in his 4 starts, I mean, it's almost like, how are they doing this? You really haven't seen all these 5 guys in St. Louis with their full potential. Lackey has done it in the past with the Angels and the Red Sox. But you didn't know what you were going to get from him. Definitely, when you knew how frustrated he probably was going into the season, playing on the salary that he's playing at, which is the league minimum of $500 thou. But it was just another exceptional week, and not just for the starters, but this bullpen has been just as money. Villanueva, Belial, Harris had his ups and downs, but he's still pitching well. Only a 3.63 ERA since he's been up. But Manus is coming in there and getting the double plays when they need it. Seagrass has turned into a righty and left-handed, really just a regular relief pitcher. You kind of thought that the Cardinals were going to roll with the way they've been rolling in the last few years with having the 2 left-handers to go against left-handed batters. But it really hasn't had to be that way. You brought Choate in, get the left-handers out, and then seemingly you bring in Seagrass to face the lefties or the righties after that. The Cardinals' whole staff before today, and it was a bad game today, and we'll get to it in a second. But they had the whole staff had a 2.58 ERA going into today's game. That's the whole staff. I mean, that's exceptional stuff. I mean, these are 5 guys that you ain't going to go to another city and they're going to say, hey, that's Lance Lynn. And they're going to name your whole staff. This is not going to happen. Lackey's the most known one. And he really wasn't even top billed in Boston. And he wasn't top billed in Anaheim. He's a lot better pitcher than he's probably been given credit for over his career. But he's the only one that might be a mainstream name. And you wonder when this is going to affect the Cardinals. Just not hitting thing. Because somewhere these pitchers are going to slip up. And it happened tonight with Lackey. But, I mean, you got to kind of be worried about the whole Jaime Garcia thing, even though he's been pitching well. Is it going to get into his head that he's gone out here and only got 1 win and 4 essential quality starts, and the Cardinals aren't scoring for him? We already kind of know how messed up his head is in the first place. So does this make it worse? Does he go out there and maybe tries to throw too hard and re-injures himself, or gets into bad mechanics or something like that? But also for the other pitchers. You know, Martinez, his head ain't all the way there. You can see the frustrations that happen when Lackey and Lynn don't get plays made behind him or something. So without the offense picking up. What happens when this pitching falters? Every starter this week since Tuesday, since we were last on, since the 2nd of June, and it was before this, but just another of 7 inning starts. And most of them routines, unless Matheny plays the numbers they like to play with the left-handers, you only need 2 relievers to get out of that. And the Cardinals are keeping 8 relievers on this roster, sometimes 7. So let's just say you're using 2 a night. I mean, if you just go back-to-back days, it keeps everybody fresh. But when do these games turn into 1-1 games in the 9th inning? When do these games turn into the 1-1 games in the 20th inning? So if the offense doesn't step it up, you could have big problems with this pitching staff. And it's just really that the Cardinals are having trouble with just runners in scoring position like last year. I mean, it's a little better. But it seems like once you get past them top 5 guys, it's just not happening in runners in scoring position. And really, it's not happening for anybody. Right now, Peralta's your only one. He's out here winning the games for you. Without Peralta this season, and the move to Wong to the leadoff spot, this team's a bad team. And the team, it's just crazy. And just to say them 2 things that you've think in your head to make this team a bad team, and yet they're playing the 2nd best team in the league right now in the Dodgers, and have won 5 of the last 7 against them in the last 2 weeks. 2 out of 3 at Busch, and then they come from the 4th to the 7th. The Cardinals go to LA, and 3 out of 4 there. Your only loss was to Clayton Kershaw. Now you have had Clayton Kershaw's number, but you can't fault a loss in the long run to Clayton Kershaw. But that's the game that Jaime pitched. And then Cardinals only had 1 hit in that game. That was Grichuk. Grichuk had the only hit in the game. They didn't even have a runner in scoring position in the whole game. They only had 3 runners. So it's essentially something to worry about. Last night, the Cardinals' only run before the 8th inning was Peralta's home run. And then he was the one to get you the game-winning RBI. Holiday came in through the clutch to tie it with a triple. But it's Peralta. I mean, he's just winning these games for you. And you can look at the averages and see that the Cardinals have a lot of high averages on the team, but it's not a power team, and it's hard to manufacture every going base by base by base. I mean, with a guy like Molina losing a lot of his power, it kind of messes with the lineup a little bit. And then Hayward also not hitting for power. Holiday not hitting for power. Mark Reynolds, even though he hasn't got as many at-bats as the other guys, he's not hitting for his usual home run power. And now tonight, Holiday goes down in the game. And now you're down to the only person that you can really think about being your offensive jumper in the bottom part of the lineup is Peralta. You got Wong and Carpenter started off. And the pop that Colt Wong has shown this season is something to look forward to, where maybe you have to shift that lineup down and maybe find another leadoff hitter. Maybe Wong should be in that little spot that La Russa should like to use as kind of a power position in that number 2 spot. With this lineup right now, I don't see what you could use. You could maybe throw Hayward up there, even though he's already said he didn't like it in the game that he actually did it. He went 0 for 4 with, I think, 2 or 3 strikeouts. Now, they say the injury's only a growing pull on Holiday. But they also said that about Matt Adams. It's going to be hard to tell until you get the x-rays. And if he's out, I guess it's Stephen Piscotty time. Because essentially there's no one else that you can got or that you can bring up that's going to affect this team at all. Your 25th man right now on this roster is a third-string catcher. And to most, he's your second-string catcher down in AAA, with Cody Stanley being down there. So right now, it's either Piscotty or Scruggs' time. If you bring Scruggs up, that kind of forces you to use Reynolds in the outfield. Do you really want Mark Reynolds playing a whole lot of outfield? And maybe the only other thing you could do there is move Carpenter to the outfield. And have Reynolds at third. Do you really want to have Mark Reynolds playing a whole bunch of third base? And even though Matt Carpenter's moved all around the field, is every day in left or right, wherever you think the best position is for him, because you can move Hayward essentially anywhere. Plus, if you don't use Hayward, you can essentially move your other two outfielders, Borges and Jay, anywhere. But do you trust Carpenter in the outfield? So the Cardinals are starting to jump into a lot of problems here. And before tonight, the Holiday injury wouldn't have affected them. But you already had the low output of offense. You did have back-to-back 7-run games, one against the Brewers and one against the Dodgers. But it's not like you were facing anything special. You faced Frias, who shut you down last week. In a game going 7 innings, only allowing 5 hits, no earned runs. And then you hit them hard this week. And that's a game that you also look at there where the Cardinals maybe started to turn around. I mean, for the first 5 runs were on 2-out hits. But if Holiday's injured for any amount of period of time, longer than maybe a 15-day DL, this team's going to be in trouble. And now you're hitting the spots in the season where you're going to be playing a little more of the Central, because you haven't played them a lot. And you also get the Royals here coming up. You also get the Twins here coming up, who, out of the blue, are just one of the best teams in the league. I mean, people are talking about it today, name 6 players in the Twins. And I can, just because I'm retarded about just remembering names. But it's hard to name the 6 guys. And most of the people that can name them 6 guys, 2 out of 3 are very easy, and Torrey Hunter and Joe Mauer. Or 2 out of 3, 2 out of 5. Or 5 or 6. So when you get into these kind of situations and have nothing to look back on, or anybody to bring up, you start looking at trades also. You should get worried as a Cardinals fan, because there's not a whole lot. I mean, Scruggs and Piscotty have been your top prospects under Tavares and Waka over the past few years. But they're not hitting all that well right now in AAA. So on a team that needs more hitting, what you're bringing up isn't going to replace what you're losing. And that's kind of a big problem right now for the Cardinals. So you kind of hope the Holiday injury doesn't affect them at all. But, well, you hope that Holiday ain't injured. Essentially, you can't just hope that it doesn't affect you, because it's going to affect a team going out with your best hitter, your third place hitter, and trying to replace that. So the only thing I can think that's any trade bait right now would be Carlos Martinez. And you would just hope that you get maybe a major league quality starter back and a good bat. But I don't think you can go out there and just trade straight Martinez for a straight Cole Hamels. So the Cardinals are going to have to find the right mix right now. Either the right trade or the right mix of minor league players. And the Cardinals aren't scared to use their minor league players, which they seem like they were in the La Russa areas for the last 2 years. It has really worked for the Cardinals doing that. Manus Segrist, Waka, and the list goes on. Adams. So the Cardinals do like to give these guys a lot of chances. And they like to give them to them early and quick. But it's also a good thing that they like to rotate guys also. If you come up and you get your chances and you're not playing all that well, they'll find someone else to do. But after Scruggs for Scotty right now, you have 0. And you know that by the people that they brought up. Minus Scruggs and Briscotti. I mean, how many times have you seen Greg Garcia on this roster? So, and he's a shortstop, and he's not a power threat or anything either, and he hasn't really proved much if off anything in the major leagues. So, yeah, he's a shortstop. He can pretty much play anywhere in Greg Garcia, but it's nothing special. But I think in the long run, what the Cardinals are going to have to do is they're going to have to keep Molina and Hayward in the 7A spots, and Grich is going to have to be an everyday player for this team to start going around, because it's starting to get a little scary, the run support that these pitchers aren't getting. And in the recent games facing Kershaw and Greinke, I mean, that is going to affect your scoring, but Brian Anderson, they only got 2 runs off of him. And another game to where they didn't get their second run until the 8th inning. So, I don't know if it's going to be a change in hitting approach. Maybe the way John Mabry's not teaching these guys to hit, but saying this is how we're going to do things. Maybe the philosophy needs a change on the hitting. Maybe instead of just trying to get hits, you try to score runs. But you can't really do that with everybody. Because people got to get on base. So, I mean, it's a lose-lose right now for the Cardinals in the hitting situation. And you really can't fault a guy like Adam Adams' injury. I mean, Mark Reynolds is hitting .261. He had another 2 hits tonight. He was 2 for 4 last night against the Dodgers with a double and an RBI. So, it's not just the Adam injury that's affecting his team. It's just been this team the whole season. And if you looked at all these, if you went by the runs per game since Wainwright's been out and tried to guess the Cardinals' record, you would have been totally off. And it's been because of the starting pitching. In the bullpen as such, but these starters are getting deep in games. But then another problem you have is like Lance Lynn tonight, and they said it's been happening over his last few starts, where he's kind of been cramping up maybe and getting tight. And where he basically willed himself to 98 pitches last night to get through the 5 innings. So if that affects you, holy cow. Because your best bet's to bring up Tyler Lyons, who was named a pitcher of the week down in Memphis. And you kind of know he's a spotty guy. He's more like that fifth starter that you've had over the past few years. Whether it's been Jaime or Joe Kelly. So, the Cardinals are going to have to look for something now. Because if this doesn't scare you with Lynn's problem and Holiday getting hurt now, then I don't know what's going to scare you. And it's partly, you can't say it's all the Cardinals' fault, but it's partly their fault that they haven't drafted as well. And maybe that was something that you got from Jeff Loom now that a lot of fans are going to miss because they're not watching a whole lot of the AAA or the AA or these people coming up. Or what, I mean, Rosenthal and Adams, them are guys that were drafted in the 30th plus rounds or 20th plus rounds or something like that. So I don't know how much of the Cardinals scouting staff he took over there, but he must have took a lot because we're not seeing the same things that we were seeing before. And yeah, some of these guys do falter out. That they found Island Craig, Matt Adams this year, Joe Kelly, who really didn't filter out till he got traded. But it's been a revolving door up to now, and that revolving door is now stuck. And you're in a situation where you might have to go out and get a big bat, though. Even if this Lynn thing is a problem, I still think you have to go after the bat. If Matt Holliday's hurt. If Holliday is hurt for the long run, then I think you have to go get the pitcher essentially. At least some kind of backer up. And that 6-starter situation, what they keep denying they want to do. But it's almost at a point where you need to do it for a just-in-case thing. And maybe they think they got guys down there. Maybe they think that Tim Cooney can come around. Maybe they think Tyler Lyons is starting to maybe figure it out a little bit. But if you're looking at the proven commodities, the Cardinals don't have that. So, and I don't want to play lineup god here and say this is how the lineup should be, but you might have to do something, move some pieces around, and maybe it's not playing Grichuk every day. Maybe it's putting Jay in center field and moving him back to the leadoff spot and shifting down from there. Maybe you let Grichuk lead off. You really haven't seen what he can do in that leadoff spot, and the one time he did lead off, he did hit pretty well. But I think the Cardinals kind of get worried about that free swinging thing with him and Wong, having them back to back. Or maybe you split them up. Maybe you move Carp down to third and you go lefty and Wong, righty and Grichuk, lefty and Carp, and then the righty and Holiday if he's there, or Peralta if Holiday's not there. But I think tonight's a big night for the Cardinals coaching staff and John Mozeliak to see this. Some changes might be needed to help this team out. And with Lackey blowing up tonight, you kind of thought that things were going to get out of hand, but then this bullpen came through again and they go 4 innings of shutout ball for the second straight night. And they only needed 2 pitchers tonight. Harris goes 2 innings. And then Villanueva goes 2 innings, allows earned run, yet his ERA only went up to .75. But you can't rely on that every night. So essentially, I think you have to maybe go and find a comparable fifth starter that becomes this team's sixth starter. And if an injury happens or the Jaime Garcia thing blows up, you got a kind of a backup. And maybe they think that's Carlos Villanueva, but I don't trust Carlos Villanueva pitching like this for the rest of the season. And I guess you could say you can also not think about the Cardinals' offense, but it's a third of the way into the season, so. And it's been this way the whole time. And you're going to need another 25th guy other than Ed Easley. I promise you that. But as this series extends on in Colorado, and you're in a ballpark where it could just go totally the wrong way for either team. And you got Waka and Carmark coming up. And them guys have been on a roll. So hopefully going to Colorado doesn't mess up the roll them two have been on. Because then it could shift the whole dynamic around. Alright, we're going to talk a little bit of Blues. And we're going to talk about a little column that Bernie wrote over the weekend. That's next. Right here on the Sports Blog on the Greater STL Sports Network. Hello and welcome back to the Sports Blog on the Greater STL Sports Network. Robert Bowlesby here with you. You could tweet me at rbowlesbyjr. You could tweet the Greater STL Sports Network at Greater STL SN. Now, I was trying to stay off the Blues for a little bit. I did mention the Ken Hitchcock signing, the Marty Brodeur stuff. But I kind of wanted to let it breathe. But it's something that just came over me with this clamoring for the Blues to go out and get, or as reported, they were trying to go get Vladimir Saboka, excuse me. They already got Tarasenko. But they were coming back to try to get back Vladimir Saboka from the KHL. Now, my whole thing on this is what has he done to prove to you that he's better than anybody else on this roster? Now, it did take me a while just to think in my head, who would he be replacing if they were to bring him back? The only two guys you can really think of is Berglund and essentially Yaskin. Unless you played him on the fourth line and then it'd be an odd thing, or maybe you could center him, but you're not going to take Reeves out of that spot. As he's kind of the one on that line that makes everything happen. With checks and hits and blocking pucks. And many people think that he can move and be a very good defenseman in this league. But going back to Saboka, and the only person I could really see him replace would be Yaskin. So I just kind of wanted to look over the stats and kind of see where they're both rated. I mean, Saboka's 27, Yaskin's 22. And Saboka's been playing in the NHL back and forth between a couple other leagues in the AHL. But he's played in a lot of NHL games. And he doesn't have the ability that many of these people think that you think he has. 07-08, 49 games, 7 points. 08-09, 25 games, 5 points. 09-010, 61 games, 10 points. 2010-2011, his first as a Blue, 65 games, 29 points. 11-12, 48, only 19 points. 12-13, 48 games, again 19 points, and then 13-14, which was his best year, 61 games, 33 points, and had a career high of 9 goals. I went back to his KHL and minor league stats and stuff, and he did have a pretty good year one year for the Boston's AHL team, but then over in the KHL, where you think that would be a lot of his good stats going against a lot of good Russian players, and something where people could say, hey, he is a good player. His highest season there was 53 games of last year, which would be the most recent year that you would compare him to. But he played 53 games last year in the KHL, had 10 goals, 28 assists, only 38 points. Now, if you look in the same year as last year, Yaskin played less games. He only played in 54, but he had 13 goals. The career high for Sobotka in the NHL was 9. And 3 playoff gear games for Sobotka. And 40 games for Sobotka in the playoffs. He only has 3 career goals. He's never had more points in a season than penalty minutes. So you want a guy that's not getting you the points to be in a box for 2 minutes and maybe causing a 5-on-4, which always leads to goals some way or another in the long run. To take out a young kid like Yaskin, who's only 22, and at 19 came into the NHL, played 2 games for the Blues, but played the majority of that year in the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League in 19 and scored 99 points. And that was just 2 years ago. You've seen what Sobotka's had. Last year, Yaskin, and basically his first full playing time, 13 goals, had more than Sobotka's career high at any point of his career in the major leagues, which is the KHL and the NHL. He's also only 22 in Yaskin. So do you want to bring back a guy that is 27 and kind of like in the Berglund stage where he's not going to get no better? It's going to be harder to develop to the NHL game because he's already played it for so long. Or do you keep the 22-year-old kid in Yaskin who you could probably develop? It could get used to the NHL game. And add to that 13 goals that he scored last year. He was on a third line last year with Stastny and Berglund. Essentially 2 centermen. So you're not going to touch the puck all that much if you're the 22-year-old kid on it. With these 2 veteran, Berglund a centerman for a long time, had good control over the puck, known more for a passer, so you know he's got good stick work. And then Yasky being your $7 million man, that young kid's not going to get a whole lot of opportunities. So, do you want the same thing for a 27-year-old Sobotka? Who was playing on essentially the same spot as Dmitry Yaskin at the beginning of last year, and they basically told Sobotka that Yaskin's better than you. He could have went out there on that 4th line, but the Blues thought they had players better than him to go out on the 4th line. So I don't understand what the clamoring to get this guy back is. And it's just the Blues fans just want anything anymore. It don't matter what it is. Oh, they've touted him for so long. So? But the Blues just want anybody just see some change. Blues fans. And you can't look at it that way. Just for the sake of change, bring back Sobotka. Because then you got to look at who he's going to replace. And maybe you can give up on a Berglund. But he's still a third line guy, and Saboka's not going to get no better than that in this point in his career, in my eyes. 27's a lot older in sports than it is in real life, and it's a lot older in sports now than it ever used to be. I mean, look at the NFL. Your shelf life's 30 as a running back. I mean, there's not a whole lot of guys in any of these sports that get better into after their mid to lower 20s. And he's not getting any better. I mean, 61 games, 9 goals, 13, 14. And he goes down to the KHL and only scores 10 goals the next season. And yet somehow, we want to replace a guy that scored more goals than him and Yaskin with him. And you could see why Saboka didn't come back. Because what can he be promised? You're not going to get on the Tarasenko, Schwartz, and Laterra line. That line's very much set. With the contracts you have, it's going to be Oshie and Steen on one line with either Backes or Stastny. So your best bet if you're Vladimir Saboka to get ice times on the third and fourth lines. So it's kind of it's kind of easy to see why he wouldn't have came back. But there was no point to really go after him as hard as people were wanting him to go after him. And it's not that hard because all you gotta do is look at the stats. So let's maybe go after a guy that can be better than Yaskin or be better than Berglund and not go after a guy that's automatically gonna be on your third or fourth line. So that's my little Blues thing for the week. I'm going to talk about a column that Bernie wrote over the weekend. And Bernie writes a lot of stuff. He goes back and forth with the Rams and the Blues and all that. And I was going to actually talk about this guy around the All-Star break. And what I'm going to do around the All-Star break is have my own little Cardinals All-Star lineup. And if you want to get involved, feel free when it happens. And I was going to do a lot of things on this guy. I kind of wanted to do my little own Cardinal Hall of Fame thing too. Because I see a lot of players that kind of maybe are overlooked for that. Because it seems like they're going after the more mainstream players and then the guys that everybody's begging for. Like some of the guys, I mean, you got like Lee Smith and then Tom Pagnozzi. But the big guy that I want to go, and one of my favorite players, probably my favorite player all time, is Ray Lankford. Now, I grew up in a pretty bad period until the 2000s with bad baseball. And as a Cardinal fan, you didn't have a whole lot to look forward to over the years. Except for essentially two guys on the Cardinals roster, and that was Ozzie Smith, of course, and Ray Lankford. And a lot of people pinned the little Ray Lankford thing on he struck out too much. He did hold the record for strikeouts one year. But that's been squashed since then. But this was a guy that kind of made it a little bit exciting to watch Cardinal baseball in the 90s. He could hit, he could steal bases. And maybe he's like a younger kid, because I kind of read up on the stories now that he wasn't the greatest defender, but I always remember him going hard after every ball, making diving catches. I mean, the first video you look up on YouTube of Ray Langford, he's trucking Taylor Dalton of the Phillies to score a run. And Bernie wrote this column because it was Ray Langford's birthday. But he also wrote it just for himself to kind of look at the stats and see that probably the most underrated Cardinal of all time was probably Ray Langford. Ray Langford came up in 1990, was traded for Willie Williams in 2001, and then came back and played 2004 with the Cardinals. Langford's a top 10 in almost every offensive stat that you look at, and even what the sabermetrics people look at for the Cardinals. Top 10 in wins above replacement, 40.4. In Cardinals history, he's 5th in home runs, 228, 7th in extra bases, 619, 8th in walks, 780, also 8th in stolen bases, 9th in RBIs and runs. He's also 9th in doubles, 10th in total bases, 12th in slugging, 20th in on-base percentage. He's the only player in Cardinals history with 200 home runs and 200 stolen bases. He's only one of 46 Major League players to do it. He ended his career 272 average, 238 home runs, 874 RBIs, 258 stolen bases, 359 doubles, 54 triples. Now you can look at the strikeouts and say, oh, maybe that's not the guy you wouldn't have in the middle of your lineup. But the guy also walked a lot of times. Like I said, 8th in Cardinals history in walk. Now when he actually had somebody to hit behind, these are how Langford's seasons turned out. This is when Mark McGwire was here in full seasons for the Cardinals and doing the whole home run thing. In 97, in McGwire's first full year, 275, 31 home runs, 98 RBIs, 21 stolen bases, 36 doubles. During the 98 home run race, 293, 31 home runs, 37 doubles, 26 steals, 105 RBIs. Now, can you tell me this is a guy you didn't want to have in the middle of your lineup? This is a guy that stayed loyal to this team that probably could have went somewhere and got a bigger contract. But he stuck around here till in really bad baseball until they let him go. And then when he even came on his comeback trail, he came back to the Cardinals in 2004. You kind of feel bad for a guy like that he never got the exposure in the playoffs that you kind of would have wanted him to have. In 96, the first time he would have got a chance to make the playoffs in his Cardinal career, he gets hurt. But I just don't see how this guy's overlooked. I mean, people are always talking about the 2020 guys and how we're kind of missing that in today's baseball. Well, this is one of the guys that did it. And did it consistently all throughout the 90s. I mean, I just wrote down some of the players he was playing with. And you could say, you go with Ozzie, but guys like Galarraga and Greg Jeffries at first. Alicea was at second. Todd Zeile and Gary Gaetti, Tatis. Bernard Gilkey and Ron Gant. Bryant Jordan, Mark Ritton. 1 year with Eric Davis. Some more first basemen, Mabry and Craig Paquette. I mean, you're not naming a bunch of all-stars. You're naming a bunch of mediocre guys that the teams could go around Langford if they needed to and get these other guys out. And if you grew up in the 90s, you've seen it. So maybe you've seen it too much that you also just thought he was so bad because of all the strikeouts. I mean, this is a guy that he had 1,500 career hits, and he had a lower than 2-to-1 strikeout to walk percentage. He had 800 plus walks and just over 1,500 strikeouts. So he did have an eye for getting on base. I mean, from 1990 to 2001, Langford's on-base percentage was 31 points higher than the league average. His slugging was 69 points higher than the league average. And his OPS was 100 points higher than league average. And these are years of the Cardinals that didn't make the playoffs. There wasn't anything else to look forward to. And maybe we're just so many bad years that you just kind of roll his name along in with it. But it also seems like that the Cardinals Hall of Fame has skipped over a lot of them guys. And there's a lot of guys that aren't in yet that aren't in the older days. That Cardinals Hall of Fame was kind of for the elite players. And now it's going to be for the best Cardinal players. I mean, what's going to get into the Cardinals Hall of Fame now, it's going to be a lot of people that aren't Major League Hall of Famers that played their greatest baseball while with the Cardinals. And you can't blame it all on Ray for what happened to him in the long run. I mean, you had Anheuser-Busch who didn't care about the Cardinals. You were kind of in a transition from Whitey Herzog to Joe Torre. And kind of in the steroid era where it turned from the Whitey ball, the base-to-base, stolen bases, and all that to the steroid era. And basically, if you weren't on steroids, then you weren't going to get all the notoriety that most of these players have. I mean, he kind of came at a time where the Cardinals were just transitioning everything. I mean, you were losing players like Willie McGee, Vince Coleman, Terry Pendleton, Jack Clark, Tommy Herr. And there wasn't nobody coming in that could replace the impact them guys had on the team. And the Cardinals really didn't try to bring them guys in. Most of the guys the Cardinals bring in, like Gilkey and Brian Jordan and Todd Zeile and players like that, were kind of players that never really played their best baseball, and they didn't play their best baseball until they left the Cardinals. I mean, look at a guy like Galarraga who just struggled in a Cardinals uniform, then went to Colorado, and just think of a guy like that would have been in this lineup to maybe get some better turnover for Ray Langford. So that's just kind of a recap of Bernie's column if you missed it. And it's just don't forget some of the players that got us to the point that we are. Pags, Nazi, Lee Smith, the Bennesses. Because without them, we really had nothing to look forward to, and we maybe don't have this fanship we have today. But if you want to clamor for somebody to go into this Hall of Fame, most people have their own agendas. You should maybe look at a guy like Ray Langford before you look at anybody else. Alright, we're going to take another break. We're going to be right back, do the hometown rundown, and talk some NBA and NHL finals right after the break on the Sports Blog on the Greater STL Sports Network. Hello and welcome back to the Sports Blog on the Greater STL Sports Network. Robert Bowlesby here with you. You could tweet me at rbowlesbyjr. You could tweet the Greater STL Sports Network at Greater STLSN. And for comments, updates, anything like that on this show or the Greater STL Sports Network, you can use those two Twitter handles, or you can email me at rbowlesbyjr314@gmail.com. Alright, let's get to that hometown rundown. We'll start this on off with the River City Rascals, as they started a great 3-game series on June 2nd on the road in Ohio against the Lake Erie Crushers. And in Game 1 for his third win on the season, Joe Shano went 7 innings, 6 hits, 0 earned runs, 1 walk, and 1 strikeout. And Taylor Hard hit a 2-run home run in the 6th to give the Rascals a win, 2-1. The Rascals and the Crushers continued play on Wednesday, with the Rascals winning that one in the 11th, 4-3. The Rascals scored the game-winning run on a wild pitch in the 11th. It was the 5th straight win for the Rascals, and Taylor Hard continued his home run streak. Game 3 in Ohio saw the Rascals sweep the series, winning 3-1. Tim Coons got the win, going 7 innings with 7 hits, 1 earned run, 1 walk, 6 strikeouts. Taylor Hard hit another home run in this game in the 8th inning for the Rascals. That was the 6th straight win for the Rascals. And they headed to Sauget, Illinois to play the rival Gateway Grizzlies at GCS Ballpark. In Game 1, a 9-0 lead was built before the Rascals could score. And a pitcher making his pro debut and bad defense, a lot of errors led to a lot of earned runs in this game in the 12-2 blowout. On a good note for the Rascals, though, in his 4th straight game, Taylor Hard hit his 5th home run of the season. Game 2 for the Rascals and Grizzlies saw the score kind of switch, as well. The Rascals blew out Gateway 12-3. 5 home runs and a strong start for pitcher Tommy Organ, who went 6 innings and allowed 3 earned runs. Danny Canea and Taylor Hard again went back-to-back. That was for the 2nd straight game. Canella had 2 home runs for 3 in his last 2, and it was the 6th straight game for Hard with a home run. The rubber game of the match saw the Rascals lose. They also lost the series. Now, they lost the game 2-1. Taylor Hard did not home run, but he did double to extend his hitting streak. He also scored the Rascals' only run. The loss ran the Rascals' record to 12-9 on the season. They come back home to T.R. Hughes Ballpark against the Florist Freedom on Tuesday, the 9th. St. Louis FC played this weekend, and they played on the road against the Pittsburgh Riverhounds at Highmark Stadium. The game ended a 1-1 tie, earning both teams a point in USL standings. It was the 2nd tie of the season between the two teams, and after a scoreless first half, a foul by St. Louis SC led to a penalty kick, and the Riverhounds capitalized, and they made it 1-0 in the 72nd minute. St. Louis FC tied the game in the 80th minute when Jeremy Litch had to one past Pittsburgh's goalie, and that's where the score would stay. Goalie Mark Pace had 5 saves in the game. The tie ran the FC's record to 3-4 with 13 points, 7th in the Eastern Conference. The top 6 will move to the playoffs with 18 games left in the USL season. St. Louis FC returns back to Worldwide Technology Park in Fenton to play the Harrisburg City Islanders Saturday the 13th. And I'll talk about the one thing that you're going to only hear me talk about on this show for a very long time. Is it only happens once seemingly every 30 years, is American Pharoah is a horse who won 3 straight races, Kentucky Derby, the Preakness, and the Belmont, become the first Triple Crown winner since Secretariat. And that's going to be about my extent to talking about that. It's cool to see, but is it really something to talk about anymore? Kind of like boxing, horse racing kind of lost its thunder. There was only 18 million people that viewed it, and I was for the Triple Crown. And more people viewed it last year. So you kind of see where it's the luster. And it's not fun for me. It's fun for some people to get their adrenaline up and then see the race. It's just not that kind of fun for me. So congratulations to Bob Baffert and American Pharoah winning the Triple Crown. Good for them. They're going to make a lot of money. The last thing I want to talk about is it's just kind of weird. All of a sudden, the NHL playoffs have lost their luster compared to the NBA playoffs. And maybe it's an ESPN doing, as they are the mothership. Maybe it's the way that the NBA and NHL promote their product. Is the NBA promotes their product globally and a lot more than NHL does. And if you listen to a lot of the radio shows and stuff, even in St. Louis, they're talking about the NBA playoffs before they're talking about the NHL playoffs. I heard a lot more horse racing talk today than I heard NHL playoff talk. And I don't understand how it's... I mean, LeBron and Steph Curry shot like 11 of 40 the other night. Apiece. Not together, apiece. I understand it's interesting going both games going to overtime. These teams going back and forth and fighting with the 2 best players in the league right now, and that's the game you want to see. Basically, Steph Curry and LeBron going one-on-one. Curry with a lot more help right now, but that's a conversation for another day. But I don't see how the NHL Stanley Cup Finals has been lost in translation. And maybe it's because I'm a hockey fan that I don't... And I'm not a hockey fan no more than I am any other sports fan. I'm a hockey fan over an NBA fan, but I'm more of a baseball and football fan than I would be a hockey fan. But it's right there close enough to be tied for first. And I'm not the biggest NBA fan in the first place. But I guess it's... With LeBron being in there, and the mothership's going to, of course, hype that up to where everybody's going to want to see LeBron fail, LeBron succeed. And maybe you don't have that villain in the NHL. Maybe the NHL needs some villains. And LeBron's not a villain in every aspect. Some people love him. Some people hate him. But he's got that luster to him. It's kind of like the Patriots of the NFL. LeBron's essentially the Patriots of the NBA. Everybody wants to beat and rag on the Patriots. Everybody wants to beat and rag on LeBron. Unless you're ESPN, of course, then you want LeBron to be the greatest thing since sliced bread. But I always thought that the NHL playoffs were more exciting than the NBA playoffs. Definitely the Stanley Cup final, and you definitely this year with Chicago and Tampa Bay going back and forth, and you had Tampa Bay replace Ben Bishop, their star goalie, with a 20-year-old in Game 2, and he ends up getting the win as the game-winning goal scored while he's in net. But if you listen to it, you wouldn't even know that Ben Bishop left the game. You wouldn't just know that the Lightning won. The series is tied 1-1. And I think the Lightning won tonight. The last time I checked, about 3 minutes left, the Lightning were winning. Ben Bishop was in that. But it still has no luster. And I don't know what the NHL can do to beef that up. The only thing they could do is change the playoff format to make the regular season a little more interesting to where maybe people watch all the way through. And Tampa Bay and Chicago aren't the biggest markets in the world, but Chicago's a pretty darn big market, a lot bigger than St. Louis is. And definitely being our neighbors, you thought it would be talked a lot more in St. Louis, but it's not really being talked about anywhere. And maybe Chicago being in it so much, and maybe just people knowing how good of a goaltender Ben Bishop, maybe they already know that it's going to be a back and forth series, and it's more exciting to watch the NBA playoffs and both these games going to overtime. But you would think that the physicality with the checking and the goalies having to make save after save and things like that, that it'd be a little more interesting than the triangle offense. But it's not. And it hasn't been. As I've watched both series, and I've been more intrigued by a sport that I don't watch a lot of year. I've watched a whole hell of a lot more NHL this year than I watched NBA. But I've watched a whole lot more of this in the NFL Finals, NBA Finals than I have the NHL Finals. So I don't know what the NHL can do to get that luster back. You're almost falling behind. Where you could be almost the fifth sport. Because this soccer thing is starting to make a big charge in the United States. I don't know what's happening with it. I mean, people are going to see the women play now. The national team. I mean, it's crazy. And you hear more about that than you do the NHL playoffs. So the NHL is going to have to find something to spice up the playoffs for sure, being the only thing that they got, because their regular season is lost on most people because half the teams make it. And the NBA's got the same problem there, but somehow their playoffs seem to make all that go away. And I'm guessing it's just these finals with the two best players in the league going against each other. And you really can't say that in the NHL because there's just so many good players. In the NHL, it's kind of hard to distinguish two. You could say Ovechkin, but he's got the horrible plus-minus rating. Crosby's kind of fizzled out over the past few years. You don't really hear about all that much about Steven Stamkos, since he's got more of a supporting cast around him now in Tampa Bay. So maybe it's not. Maybe it's building a star for the NHL, putting them out there. And they really need to get on a bigger name network. They really need to go for the Fox, is what needs to happen from the NHL. They need to get on that second network. Because you got ESPN, you got Fox, and then you got everybody else. None of them are separated after that. I bet you the ratings for the NBC network are probably about the same as the ratings as the SEC network. So, I mean, I think a playoff change and promoting your stars a little more could help you out. I mean, you see these NBA players in headphone commercials and car commercials and doing commentary on SportsCenter, and you don't see that anywhere for any of the NHL players. I mean, every now and then you see one while the game's going on NBC. And I mean, and it's just another downfall with Gary Bettman. I've never been able to run that league the right way to make it a better league, to build off the success of it. It always seems like he's just waiting for the success, unlike the other commissioners are always trying something different. I mean, look at the NFL going to London and Mexico and all this. Baseball's done the same thing with Cuba and Mexico. The only thing the NHL's done is to broaden their product is put them stadium classics in, the winter classics. The stadium series. But when you only do it on the East Coast, because that's your moneymaker, there's not going to be a lot of people that get into that. I mean, you have like a long history with a team like the Blues, and they've never been involved in one home or road team. So there's got to be a better way to build up your product than what the NHL is doing. I mean, I could probably, if you probably went and looked at the ratings, even though it's always one of the top rated shows, I guarantee you twice the people tonight watched Monday Night Raw over the NHL playoffs. I could look at Twitter and tell you that very easily. So it's just kind of crazy that the NBA has kind of just taken over this little playoff situation. I mean, even taken away from the MLB. And it should take away from the NFL. You heard people talking today about Rams OTAs. You really talking about a bunch of fat guys running around in t-shirts and gym shorts? Really? I mean, that's something to talk about. Oh, look at the lines out there. Bear Jones was with the center for the first team today. I could go out there and play center with the first team today if I really wanted to. Foles has great direction. Well, all he has to do is point. He's not getting chased. These are things that don't really matter. Kind of like the Rams skipping that little mini cap thing. It's not really that big of a deal, and yet we're going to talk about just to fill time. I mean, I kind of got lucky tonight with the Holiday injury to give me something more to talk about to fill more time, but there's got to be other things to talk about. Just do what I did and look up weird news on the internet. And I've talked about, and I'm going to just put this out here just for the fun of it. But I talked a story before about it. The guy, he stole the ice cream machine, and then you got another guy that went to a lady's house and made tater tots and fell asleep. Well, you got this burglar in New Mexico who decided to break into a house and steal the guy's car keys, but before he left with the car, he decided to cook a baked potato, and before the potato was done, decided to go rake the leaves. So this must be a struggle for these people to get food around the world. I mean, instead of just robbing the house, you gotta make the food before you leave. Or you can talk about the guy. Maybe the NHL should do this. Or this can also go into last week's episode. Go be part of my Mighty Duck new movie. Mighty Duck 4. The NHL years. And we'll come up with a better name in the long run. But guy would be spending 1 week in jail for driving drunk on a Zamboni. Now that just sounds like good old-fashioned fun. And, wow, I mean, this is some of the stories that come around. And it's a lot better than talking about a bunch of fat guys in t-shirts and gym shorts. And it's nice to see them out there on the field and all that, but is it that important that you got to spend 15 minutes talking about, oh, this is what I seen today, and this is what I seen yesterday. And Havestein's playing left guard, and then they were looking at him at right tackle. I mean, I guess you kind of get the sense of what the Rams want to kind of go through and look at these guys, but it's nothing that serious to where you have to waste time on it. All right, and that's going to do it for this week on the Sports Blog. Thank you for listening, and I'm Robert Bowlesby, and this is the Sports Blog on the Greater STL Sports Network.